Good evening. Today is Monday, June 27th, 2022, and we have several new updates from the National Health Commission of the People's Republic of China. Since we last did an update on the spread of COVID-19 in the country, we can note here the June 23rd update there were 13 new indigenous cases, 9 in Shanghai, 3 in Beijing, and 1 in Inner Mongolia. Perhaps most concerningly, on the 24th of June, that managed to include 14 cases in Inner Mongolia. Nonetheless, Inner Mongolia by now does appear to have gotten that outbreak under control. I will note these cases in Guangdong province, though. Guangdong on June 25th reporting 5 confirmed cases. Beijing continuing to report some domestic cases, though at the moment these all appear to be under control or in quarantine or in isolation, and therefore not adversely affecting the epidemiological situation in the city of Beijing. Again, on June 26th, 2 new cases, 1 in Beijing and 1 in Guangdong. And then on June 27th, 5 new indigenous cases, 3 in Beijing and 2 in Shanghai. Anyway, on June 25th, 2022, so just 2 days ago, Beijing vowing to reopen its schools. They reopened actually today, or at least most of them reopened today, Monday, June 27th. And the rest that have not yet opened will be reopening next Monday, July 4th. So that being the kindergarten. So primary and secondary school students can now return to in-person classes today, Monday, June 27th, but kindergartens will be going back next Monday, July 4th. And sports activities for the young can resume at non-school locations as well today, Monday, June 27th. So Beijing starting to reopen quite significantly and resembling some sense of normalcy, albeit not quite, in the sense that you do have to present a negative COVID test to access significant parts of the city, whether that be education or entertainment or business or leisure and whatnot. But nonetheless, Beijing seeking to change course from what it's been going through over the past 2 months to now enjoying a pretty substantial reopening and really overcoming the Heaven supermarket bar outbreak that really threatened the city's ability to control the virus earlier this month. Shanghai also declaring victory over COVID-19. I'm not sure actually if it is presented in this article, but the Shanghai Communist Party chief Li Qiang, he used pretty strong language in declaring that the city had won. He said that the city won the war to defend Shanghai, and that had been done by implementing the instruction of the president of China, Xi Jinping, who has vowed to continue with the zero COVID strategy, and that those decisions were completely correct. And you saw a similar message from Shanghai, where they said that the decision to lock the city down for 2 months was the correct decision to ensure that the virus stopped its spread and that it did not lead to more casualties in the Chinese population. Nonetheless, we continue to see the difficulties of the zero COVID strategy. Shenzhen, in the south of China, struggling to stamp out the virus, reporting a couple of new cases. Those are the ones that I mentioned prior in Guangdong province. And they implemented some testing and some other restrictions that I believe are still currently in effect, or at least until that outbreak is stopped. But nonetheless, Beijing and Shanghai at 0 COVID cases after 4 months, a significant accomplishment for the 2 cities and for the Chinese national government, aggressively pursuing this strategy despite the very, very poor odds that were presented to them in March and April with the outbreak in Shanghai. But nonetheless, 0 COVID once again achieved in China's 2 largest cities. Perhaps quite interestingly, though, over the past few days, you had an announcement from the Beijing secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, Kai Qi, and he said that in the next 5 years, Beijing will unremittingly grasp the normalization of epidemic prevention and control, which is essentially meant to, or essentially read as the city will maintain its zero COVID policy for the next 5 years, i.e. until 2027. And that appeared to cause some consternation online. You can see here that it sparked anger and confusion among Beijing residents. And even one Weibo user writing "Countdown to Escape China." So you can really see that although the national government and the local governments are touting the success of the strategy in controlling the virus and ensuring that there are no indigenous or community cases in the country. The public does appear to be quite significantly fed up with the extent of the restrictions, how long they have gone on for, and how pervasive they have been in daily life. In Beijing, even without having endured the extensive lockdown that Shanghai did. And so, whether or not the Beijing or whether or not the Chinese city government will be able to continue these policies over the next few years remains to be seen. How do they grapple with increasing discontent among the population? And eventually, how do they chart an exit path from the pandemic? That all remains to be seen. Um, we do have some more news from Shenzhen. They recently, yesterday, June 26th, imposed a shutdown of their border with Hong Kong for 3 days. They also closed some businesses in Futian district until today, Monday, June 27th, at least. And like how Beijing is requiring COVID-19 tests every 72 hours for certain venues, Shenzhen is requiring them every 24 hours for certain venues. So essentially daily mandatory testing to access transportation. And that is quite significant in terms of being, again, an invasive part of daily life in China. And as it goes for this closing of the border with Hong Kong, that appears to be something that will continue at least through Wednesday, June 29th. Interestingly enough, the president of China, Xi Jinping, will be visiting Hong Kong soon to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the handing over of Hong Kong to China from the United Kingdom. But nonetheless, Hong Kong, that border being closed because Hong Kong does have an outbreak of the virus. They do not have a zero COVID strategy. It's just not palatable there. And they will potentially continue to have instances like this where the virus jumps the border into Guangdong province, and so vigilance by the Guangdong officials here in shutting down that border. We had also noted the last time we had an update about some indigenous cases in Macau being the gambling hub in southern China that had until recently been really successful in its zero COVID strategy, reporting just a couple dozen cases of the virus and no deaths. Nonetheless, they launched a third round of mandatory testing for all residents today, Monday, June 27th. So now a very much so significantly invasive process requiring everyone to get tested. And they currently now have 299 cases in their outbreak of COVID-19. It remains to be seen how Macau will be able to contain this outbreak. I think that they will be able to stamp it out just simply by rapid testing and tracing and quarantining. They are continuing to abide by the zero COVID strategy, as is that ordained by the Chinese government. And we'll see how this outbreak evolves over the coming days and whether or not they can bring that transmission down to zero. And that is the update from mainland China on Monday, June 27th, 2022. We had some news from Beijing and Shanghai that they have essentially won their battles against the virus and they have achieved zero COVID once more. Shenzhen having some issues with the virus, shutting its border with Shanghai, and really racing to try and stamp out what's left of the virus in Guangdong province. Macau having a pretty substantial outbreak, around 300 cases, also doing a significant amount of testing and quarantining in an attempt to stamp out that outbreak. So we'll continue to watch the Shenzhen and Macau outbreaks over the coming days, and also look to see how China continues to navigate the zero COVID strategy over the coming weeks and months. Thank you.